main variation is bishop f8 to b4, which is a bit strange actually, because it's mostly a cheap trap. Black hopes that white will take with knight on e4, but since the knight will take and the queen will take, and then black's queen will take on d2 with a mate. And there's a very simple move, white, just castling. And most books give bishop takes c3, which as the main line, but I think it's bad. You give white an unopposed dragon bishop on b2, and the d file after d takes c3, which I think is a very good move, as the c3 pawn is in the way at the moment, but it will advance to c4 and hold track of d5, and then g4, g5 will come. For example, something like this. Black moves his queen, g4, a typical move. Another typical move is f3, this kind of position. White has shown a compensation here, as he is long ahead in development. After g4, castling, c4, e5. Now the bishop is threatening g4, so white defends it. And now white has a simple plan, a standard setup. He wants to play bishop g2, queen e3, knight e2, and then either knight c3 or knight g3. Just take back the pawn on e4. And then he will have the bishop pair, more space, and strong bishops. Okay. Another move that on the 5th turn that one might worry about is knight c6. I remember that I worried about it when the first time I noticed that it was possible. But white has two simple plans to meet it. Either just castle, and if knight d4, we go back to e1, and then you play d3 and open the d file with plenty of compensation. Or you can take on e4 with a knight. If the knight jumps in, you play queen d3. It may look a bit clumsy, but it's much easier to play than you think if you just try it. Let's see. And now there's probably no other alternatives left. So let's go back to the main game, or the stem game. Marosi is black against Reti in Göteborg 1920. He played bishop e7, and Reti played castling long. Knight b d7, g4, the typical pawn thrust. Wants to chase away the knight so he can take an e4 without simplification. Black doesn't want to allow that, but now he has weakened his future kingside, or at least if he chooses to castle kingside. And white just builds up on e4 instead. Maybe he can play h4 and g5 later. And Marosi decides to play something very solid, so he tries a Caro-Kann setup almost. It's c6, white goes on with h4, and queen a5. Black wants some counterplay. Now the simplest and probably the best would simply be king b1, but Marosi played knight h3. It's probably not any major mistake. The big difference is that if I had played king b1, and if the game had gone the same, he could have taken control of the h-file like this. Knight c5, g5, take, rooks go off, the knight moves, and queen h5. And as you see by the arrows, suddenly white has lots of threats here. But let us go back to the game. After knight h3, knight c5, g5, h takes, knight d5, and king b1. And white is probably already a bit more comfortable here. Black still hasn't solved the problem of where to put his king or the bishop on c8. So he puts it on the only available square, and Reti decides to take back the pawn. Could have taken it with a knight as well, or even play f3 and try to open up a bit, making castling long difficult, because f7 would be hanging. But okay, bishop takes e4, knight takes e4. Now black has gotten the bishop pair, but his bishops are not very threatening, down on the 7th rank. Black has finally castled, but that cost him a pawn.